Hello, everyone. This is Marianne with the Sustainable Living Podcast. How you all doing today? I hope you're having a wonderful, wonderful week. It's summertime now for us and winter time starting for you guys in Australia. So it's kind of like right at the beginning, which makes it so interesting because the possibilities are open. We are not tired of summer yet, and you guys are not tired of winter yet. So here we are doing a lot of growing right now, and I guess you all are getting ready for skiing. It's so fun. Today, you're going to hear from Emily and myself. We're talking about drawbacks of living in a smaller dwelling, in a tiny home in Emily's case. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. Oh, and remember, on Patreon, I'm doing like live little video clips now. A lot of them are exclusive for our patrons, which you can be a patron for as little as $1 a month, which we would super much appreciate. That would be at patreon.com, Sustainable Living Podcast. Without further ado, here's the show. Have a great week. What I was thinking we could do is talk a little bit about the downsides of small house living.
Yeah.
You know, because we have done so much like, yay. It's a wonderful. And so, you know, and there are always two sides to the story.
And we want to be realistic too.
Yeah. Absolutely. First, I wanted to see if we can do a little update.
Yeah.
Last time we talked, your house was maybe en route or maybe not, and you were hoping. So what's happening with that?
Yeah, so our tiny house should be here in 2 weeks. We've been talking back and forth with our truck driver, and we have to, go around his schedule to make sure he's not wasting a trip out here. So he wants to make sure he has a load to go back with. So our tiny house, as of now, is planned for the first week of June. So we are getting really excited. I can't wait to have my washer back. We are actually at a friend's house right now who is willing to share their washer with us because the laundromat just is not working for our family.
Yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit why the laundromat is not working for your family?
Yeah, well, it's so interesting, with tiny house living has so many benefits, but being in our camper, it's been really eye-opening to what it's been really humbling because it's almost like we're stepping into this whole new realm of living where, you don't have all your amenities in your home, which is a lot of people's experience. And we were washing our clothes in our tub in our camper, and it was taking me like 3 hours a day. And that's just not sustainable when you're homeschooling. So
and it's not a lot of fun. I mean, that's
right.
Yeah.
Well, it's not sustainable either. I was wasting so much water because it would get dirty. Here in Colorado, there's so much dust and it was and dirt, and I was wasting so much water. So yeah, we started trying the laundromats, and we called, and they don't allow us to rinse out the toxic laundry soaps that other people are using and the dryer sheets. I actually got a stuffy nose and I got a little sick the first time. So now I have to stand outside because of the smells from the dryers. But yeah, it was just a crazy experience, and it's expensive. And it really made my heart to go out to people because it really, I had to step into other people's shoes, and it was very humbling. So it just made my love of like tiny house living and community building even more, because then you can have like that shared washer dryer. And
you, in your tiny home, you actually have a washer and dryer. But if you talk about shared one in a community, would that then means that people can only use certain cleaning agents?
Yeah, so part of our application to get into these tiny house communities will include education classes. And that will be something that we'll be presenting to City Council and talking about how our commitment to green, sustainable living. So there'll be only certain products allowed, and they will have to be cleared. Of course, we want people to be able to use like their brand that they like, but it will have to be on the approved list of sustainable, that it's not going to, have any harmful chemicals, plant-based, all that fun stuff. So that's the goal. And we're hoping that the community will be able to vote on that and be on board with it.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm laundry is definitely something I use only soaps which are biodegradable
Hmm.
here in California to use for gray water use, which a lot of the soaps you could use like in Colorado has quite a bit of rain in the summer too, right? So you probably could use it there or in Oregon where there's a lot of rain, but down
Hmm.
here you have to be super aware of salts and stuff. So there's really only one laundry soap you can use. But I have
Oh,
gotten to the place too when I don't go to supermarkets very often, but I have to avoid the aisles where all the laundry
yeah.
soaps are. It's actually really bothering me, you know. I think the more you go away from living with artificial perfumes, the more your body just can't stand it anymore. You get immediate reactions.
And I noticed too, like I didn't even know dryer sheets were still a thing. So I was sort of like blown away because the dryer sheets are polluting our air, not
Yeah.
only your own body, but the air. So now walking past these suburban homes where we're staying, I can't, the smell like almost knocks me off my feet. I have to like go around.
Yeah, it's there are times sometimes where I feel like, oh, we have such a long ways to go with educating, and commercials are very powerful,
Hmm.
and you and I don't really watch TV, so we don't even know what's all available. you know but industry obviously wants to sell their products, and whatever we decide smells good, right? It changes with our awareness and
Hmm.
preferences and so forth. But to me, those laundry detergents don't even smell good in any way, shape, or form. But some people just, it's like, oh, it smells so good. And it's like, oh, it stinks. But that's kind of a side topic. We were going to talk about what are the difficult sides of tiny home living. And now you're even living smaller
Hmm.
in the camper. Your house is pretty, well, it's not big compared to a big house, but it's definitely big compared to your camper. So maybe we do a little bit of comparison. And then also, you lived in your house for how long? About
Over
a
two
year?
years.
Over
2 years.
2 years.
Yep.
So you definitely have a comparison between living in a big house and living in a small house. And I'm sure there was like a honeymoon period. And then there's also stuff where you're like, So just wanted to get into that a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I like to be really real. On my Instagram, especially, I talk a lot about how important it is to be very authentic. And of course, we love the tiny house and we would never go back. But yeah, I mean, it's obviously, yeah, there's challenges. For example, obviously parking is a huge issue, which is why we're here legalizing it. But as far as actually living in the home, you get creative. And people always ask about time with your partner, right? Being intimate. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, you don't have a room. And I can't even tell you how many times I get that question. But, I mean, gosh, there's floor space, right? You just get creative. So that's always the first thing people ask is like, what do you do with your husband? Like, where do you guys hang out alone? And it's like, there's a kitchen, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
that's always a fun adventure, especially as our son gets older and no bedrooms. But, you just figure it out. And the one thing that we noticed with our tiny house and our camper is kind of exercising at home has been an interesting journey because there's really, we actually can't even like put our arms all the way straight out without touching something as far as like horizontally to the side. So we've just gotten really creative with exercising outside or you just don't extend your arms all the way sometimes. And it's just getting creative with exercising and yoga and Pilates and stuff has been a challenge, but we just take it outside when we can. But we're still trying to work through that because we definitely find ourselves working out less because it's just a little bit more challenging when you've only got like 5 feet of space.
Yeah.
It's a hallway.
And for those of you who don't know Emily yet, tell us about your background. You were doing
Oh
gymnastics all
yeah.
your life, right?
Yeah, I was a college athlete and a gymnastics coach for 19 years. I've just recently stopped coaching gymnastics. So yeah, it's been interesting trying to just getting creative and biking or exercising outside or on the beach or at the playground. So that's been interesting. And as far as like small space, it's just the little things, like the sink fills up so quickly. We have to do dishes every single day, and we have a half dishwasher. But if you miss dishes, you have no place to cook, especially in the camper. We're really struggling in the camper. You have to put like a cover over the sink to cut up vegetables and stuff, but then you can't wash your hands. So you have to walk to the bathroom to wash your hands. So the camper definitely has a lot more challenges than the tiny house because there's no kitchen. And in the tiny house, it's pretty funny. We have to like really be careful about cooking together because we're always bumping into each other, and we have knives and stuff. So we have to be really careful. So that the kitchen is definitely like, you just kind of have to sort of work it out after a couple months. You kind of figure out your space, and like we kind of learn how to walk around each other and stuff. But at first it's a little challenging because you're like, where do I stand? Where am I supposed to be? Don't bump me while I'm cutting or.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Our house is not tiny by your standards, but it's small. And I find for me the challenge is to keep things hidden in order. I go to other people's homes and there's like no clutter. There's nothing around. And I ask them, well, how do you do it? And then they have all this cubby hole and closets where everything is inside. And it's like, yeah, I don't have those. So like right now I have chicken food I need to mix. So I have all these big bags of wheat and oats and whatever. And it feels like my whole living room is full of big bags of food,
Yeah, there's no place to hide them.
Yeah, no.
That actually applies to the tiny house too. Like it's so funny if you follow my Instagram, especially my tiny house Instagram, there's just like,
yeah, say really quick where people can find you on Instagram.
So if you're looking only for tiny house stuff, it's Tiny House Big Moments. But if you're looking for tiny house plus camper plus lifestyle, it's Mindful Minimalist Mama. But the Tiny House Big Moments, there's photos. I was being very real. And there's just our couch is 10 feet long, but it's like the only place to put anything. So everything, you come in and you've got backpacks and laundry and whatever. Everything's just laid out on the couch. So then that's kind of like our sorting area. So of course, when we have guests over, we like pick up, but in general, half the couch is just like coats or backpacks or our craft for the day or whatever. And it's pretty funny because, when you have 325 square feet, it's super quick to clean, but you do have to stay on top of it. You can't let it go because then you have no place to sit.
Right. Which is an incentive to clean up, right? It's like, okay, I want to sit somewhere. What do I do?
It is. It's super motivating because you always have to be organized and you always have to be clean, which is, I love that about it. And it's the one thing that nobody thinks about in a tiny house is there's no entryway. So next time we're going to get like a little deck, but we don't have a deck as of now. And so you are vacuuming every single day. And if you don't, your whole house is like an entryway. So the dust and the dirt and, especially if it's muddy, everything is just like all over. So I do have to pretty much vacuum and mop every single day because it's like you think of it as your whole house is your entryway. It works. It's because, again, it takes me like 3 seconds, right? But I wasn't expecting that. I was kind of, a little bit naive about it. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess we don't really have like a patio. So all the dust comes in.
Even in my house, there's so much nature and animals coming in and out. My dogs are like, in and out. And I'm the same way. You have to vacuum pretty much every day. That's, I think, part with having nature around you. Well, you live kind of in a suburb now, right?
Yeah, but our tiny house will be on gravel, so it's going to get real fun and messy.
Oh, really? So have you found the place to park it?
It'll be in a temporary spot. I can't really say anymore.
Okay. That's fine. But are you going to be able to live in it, or are you going to use it as a model like you originally planned?
We'll just say both.
Both. Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, we're really optimistic that we will have a community built by the end of August. So we just have this awkward couple months that we just sort of will be honestly hiding out. So again, the challenges of tiny house living is you kind of are off the radar, but we hope to have that finished by August. or maybe early September. But we're really optimistic about it. We do have a property, so we can hopefully stop hiding like we have been doing for the last 2 years.
You guys are moving fast, so it's not that long that you have been in Colorado. So that's really fast movement to find a property and possibly getting agreements. That's pretty cool. So yeah, so this is, like you already said, parking can be definitely a problem. When you have it on wheels, it's considered movable, but in most cities, you're not allowed to sleep in your vehicle on the street or just parked somewhere, right?
Correct. Yep.
Even so, in San Diego, there are changes right now because we have so many homeless and there are a lot of people which live in their car. Talk about really tiny living, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I guess a car is better than nothing. But they are considering now to have certain parking lots dedicated for overnight sleeping so that you can feel safe and you don't have to worry about being, woken up. And
Oh, that would be huge. Yeah.
I mean, I kind of understand a little bit that idea that you have that ordinance that you can't just sleep in your car, but really I don't, because if you're traveling and you have a camper,
Right.
the idea is that you can just stop and sleep when you're tired, So that just seems very odd.
In Walmart, you can park. Anyone can park overnight at Walmart with no worries of getting kicked
so
out.
So that's one good thing, because usually I'm not a huge fan of Walmart. So, okay, they have one good thing going for
You have one place to park.
Good. There's always some good in everything. So do you feel like there are other things which are more difficult in a small house compared to a bigger house?
The benefit is it forces us outside and to go out and do things and we find as many free things as we can. But the downside is the fact that, a lot, especially in the winter, we find ourselves kind of needing to spend the money doing indoor rock climbing, which we love, but things add up. Yeah, it adds up to kind of have these indoor playgrounds. And that's the downside is, a lot of times when we were in our big house, we literally brought a little toddler slide and stuff into the house. And so we find ourselves doing memberships and things, but there's pros and cons to that too. We're getting out, supporting the local community and stuff, but it is different when you kind of have to think ahead as far as okay, what are we going to do for the winter? What do we need to prepare ourselves with? What do we want to do what membership do we want this year? Like the zoo or.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially in a cold climate. Kids do want to move a lot. And so, yeah, even here with my grandchildren, we plan on doing stuff. You don't want to have them at home, but at my house, I can just open the door and they're out in the yard and can explore. And when you have temperatures, which are pretty nice for the most part, it's definitely much easier. Yeah. So one of the things I was thinking about, if you have a lot of hobbies, let's say people which do quilting or, things where you need a certain amount of material. Do you know people in tiny spaces, how would they deal with that?
Yeah. A lot of them do just totes, plastic totes under their tiny house. My hobby is gardening. So that's been really hard because I can't start anything inside. There's no windowsills. There's no place to put them in a window. Well, we do have a spot we could put it, but we have cats. So they would just walk all over it. They would turn it into a bathroom or a playground or something. So that we can't just shut a door and have our little prep for our garden. So that's kind of been a challenge for us. So we're getting creative. We're going to eventually get one of those tiny little hoop ones or those glass ones where you can just kind of bring them with you and have a starter. Gosh, you're so much better at, I just look at the back of the seed packet and plant it, right? In Minnesota, we have so much water, it just grows. But yeah, so we can't do a lot of plant starting. We have to get creative with how many plants. And I'm such a plant fanatic, especially for air quality. And with cats, it's this whole new thing of oh my gosh, we can't just keep this in a room or keep it up high. There's no place to hide it. So we're going to get creative with some hanging plants and stuff where the cats can't, well, they still could, but they won't be as likely to get it, or some of those succulents. So we're going to try to get creative with plants now that we're going to, especially when we get on a community where it's going to stay We haven't really been able to do plants because we're always moving, and that's such a pain to like get your plants in your truck and make sure they don't spill all over the place.
And that can get very dirty if if you have a bunch of pots falling over. Yeah, that's a really good point. Said you still want to be considering the indoor air quality to, and plants are important for that. I'm not doing really well with houseplants. I'm not a good waterer. You know, even outdoors, things do best if I have them on some automatic something, you know. And I think like in Germany, we had tons of houseplants, but you couldn't go outside. But here I can go outside every day. So it's, you know, and I have the windows open pretty much all day long. So I figure
some great air. Yeah.
It's as good outside as it is inside kind of a thing. I don't really know how to ask intelligent questions because I haven't been in that situation. So as somebody who has moved from, you had a fairly big house, right?
Yep. 2,200, yeah.
And then you moved to the small one. What do you feel were your biggest adjustment issues, if there were issues?
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh, yeah. Downsizing is always stressful. I guess I shouldn't say stressful, but it's a long process. And I wasn't mentally prepared, which is why I wrote my book so people can kind of prepare for this. You know, we were like, oh, yeah, we'll get this done in like a couple weeks, whatever. Oh, my gosh. It's taken us 3 years and I still have like 3 totes at my mom's house. I was just like, I can't do this right now. We have to move. I'm going to have to come back and do it on vacation and go through the last of my stuff because from 2,200 square feet to 325, it took us over 3 years and we did it in stages. And just that emotional release of memorabilia was definitely the hardest part because we all have, not all, but many of us, you know, we have that like emotional attachment, especially to things that were passed down to us from generation to generation. And you just, you know, we kind of grew up with that. Like, our parents had stuff from their parents and so on and so forth. So you kind of have this family memorabilia. So that was the hardest part. And figuring out how can I be, you know, sustainable about this as far as like upcycling or selling or donating, or how am I going to do this in a sustainable way, but also like respecting the memories. Like, do any of my other family members want them? So it was kind of like a slow emotional release, which is why I did it it took 3 years to do it because I was like a photographer, like I coined myself as a photographer as a teenager. So I just like took photos all the time. And back then there was no digital, right? So that ages me a little bit, but you know, I was printing off photos. And so I have like bins and bins of photos. And it's so funny because I went through them and they were like doubled and there was like shade, like you could barely see my face in some of them, or they were blurry. And I was like, why did I keep these? Like, what was I doing?
Well, it's kind of like even on the computer, we all have photos on there where you're like, really? You know, this is 50 times the same pose. Why do we have this? Yeah, that's pretty funny. Which brings me to another question. So your son is still little, but as he grows, he might accumulate things, you know, like he might go into sports and win trophies, or he will do a lot of artwork. And how are you planning on keeping enough to make him feel that it's important that he wants those things, but not having so much that you can't move anymore?
Yeah, so we kind of have like a year rule. So if he hasn't talked about or brought out or mentioned anything for a year, then we take a picture of it. And then eventually we'll make like one of those like Shutterfly books, or there's other websites, but we'll make a book out of it. So you take a picture of it, you can write about it, what happened, and then you forever have that memory without having, you know, the big plastic thing or whatever. So that's been really neat. I can't remember, you know, there's a lot of women blogging about that in the minimalist movement. And I wish I could remember who I captured it from, but that was the best advice I got, is take pictures of their artwork, take pictures of their trophies, their medals. And it was funny because I was a gymnast, right? So I had, oh my gosh, so many, because you get like a participation ribbon for every time you show up. And I was a high level athlete, so I had a ton of stuff. And it was so funny though, because going through it, I was like, yeah, but it wasn't the trophy or the medal or the ribbon that I remember. It was Actually, it was like the before and after when I was hanging out with my friends, or I don't remember what place I got. I don't remember, like, maybe there's like 3 occasions in my 19-year career that I was like, oh yeah, that was really memorable. I can't believe I accomplished that. But in general, and it was so funny because like I kind of slowly downsized my medals and trophies and stuff. And then I got to the end, and by the end I was like, where am I going to put this? I haven't looked at this in 20 years. I just donated it. Somebody can use it as like a craft or something, or, so I think taking a photo and just talking about the memory and just remembering what happened was the most important part.
I really like that idea. Yeah, we're definitely holding on to a lot of things which have no value in a sense of being, have monetary value, or, I have some things I'm definitely holding on to because they're from like a great grandmother in
Right.
really old lace or buttons which couldn't even get them anymore as the way they were made and stuff. So that's actually emotional valuable, but also probably has some monetary value attached to it. I wouldn't be opposed of getting rid of it, but not getting rid of it, if you know what I mean. If somebody could really appreciate that and turn
Right.
it into something amazing, I totally would give it to them. But if you just put it out there, the next person might just throw it in the trash. And I wouldn't want that to happen. Writing about it, I think, is brilliant because we forget.
Yeah.
We forget the details and we forget so much. In that way, it would be way more permanent than holding on to actually metal or whatever it is.
Well, and you bring up such a good point because there's this whole fad out there about, every time, especially when you're an athlete or if you're, whatever thing is your thing, a lot of times you get like a t-shirt with the activity. So we have all these gymnastics t-shirts saved from these like and they have the date and, the year, and that's kind of fun. And it's kind of fun to like, especially you look back at like the 90s and you see it kind of evolve from like the designs that were popular in the 90s to like 2000. And so we saved all our t-shirts, and my mom, when she retires, if she ever retires, or I'll pay someone, we're going to do a quilt out of the t-shirt. And I know people are doing that with baby clothes. They're making baby clothes quilts because then it has a purpose, and then you can pass it on to your family members. And who doesn't need a blanket, right? Like things like that where they're kind of, like you said, those meaningful memorabilia. And I kept my grandpa's paintings. He was an artist, a very good artist, and I kept a couple of his paintings, but of course I couldn't keep them all, right? So, but then they spread out to the nieces and nephews and all this stuff. So there's ways to keep things in the family for sure.
And that was nice for your nieces and nephews that they now have a part of the family history too. Yeah, my sister-in-law is a quilt artist, and she has made a lot of quilts out of t-shirts and stuff for people, or even men's shirts or ties, things which were memories, especially like the ties and that kind of stuff was a lot of time if the person had passed away and the person left behind just didn't want to get rid of everything. That's a way to turn it into some useful, hold on to the memory, but not just have a closet full of unusables, basically.
Upcycling.
Upcycling, yes, and we love that. All right. Any other things you would like to share? People asking you about how you spend time with your husband, but what about spending time by yourself?
Yeah. Spending time with myself hasn't been as tricky. Well, in the camper, it's a nightmare. People who have been living in RVs for a long time, like I am like, wow, you're amazing. Because I don't know if it's because we shift from the tiny house to a camper and then now we're getting back to a tiny house. I don't know if we went straight to the camper if we wouldn't know any different. But in the camper, it's just all one room. But in the tiny house, we have lofts. So in the tiny house, it's not an issue because we can kind of like, it feels like we're in our own room and we have like shades that we draw. So I do get my alone time there. But in the camper, I'm definitely feeling the pain. It's really hard because there's no escape besides like the bedroom that has like a curtain, right? It's like, but you can hear everything in the other room and everything. So it is a challenge. And I just find myself getting outside, going for a walk, and that's my alone time. But I do miss, the tiny house where I can go up in my loft and read a book or paint or color or whatever. So that is something to think about, is how you do your design, or if you're going to do a camper versus, and some campers do have bedrooms, right? Or they have doors and stuff, and you can find ways to do it. But yeah, definitely think about that. And for us, the other really tricky part was figuring out what to do with like tools and like garden stuff. I really feel like kind of what's a good way to say it? Kind of like I'm enthralled with the van movement and like the bus movement and people who move all the time. Cause I'm kind of like, wow, like how do you do that? Like, as you know, like we were talking about, like as a gardener or like taking care of land or tools or everything. I mean, that stuff, it takes a lot of space. So when we were in Minnesota and sort of stationed, we had a little portable shed, but it was still huge. I mean, it would have taken up our whole truck because we need a spot for bikes and, you know, our son's like kind of outdoor toys and stuff. And so, yeah, just figuring all those logistics out because we got it down to where we have our truck and our camper and that's it. And that took a lot of work, a lot of like bins and, we really weren't able to bring a lot of our garden stuff. You would laugh. We actually brought we have a mower that's like the 1970s, no gasoline. You just push it, right? And it's like the circle. I can't remember what they're called, but
they're called push mowers. I have one too.
Yeah. And we couldn't get rid of it because I was like, no matter where we go, we're going to need to cut grass. It disassembles itself and we like shoved it under the camper and we're like, yes, we brought but that's about it. You know, I miss my rakes and my broom and you know, that's the beauty of the community though, is that we'll have all that stuff shared. So you don't have to like bring it with you every time you go somewhere. So we're hoping to get like a network of communities because that's kind of stuff. It takes up so much room to bring all this garden tools and like car tools.
It's a completely unnecessary expense.
Right.
You know, it's like 10 people buying the same items. They use 1 hour a week.
Right.
It doesn't make sense. You know, it's like you can work it out so you can take turns, you know.
Right. Right. Especially homeschooling. It's like, I get it during the day and you guys can have it after work.
Exactly. I mean, there's always a way. And I can understand that people don't necessarily want to share expensive tools if other people are not as careful with them. But if it's a shared investment, then everybody gets to lose if you're not careful with it. And, you know, it's a different setup if you share it.
Yeah, especially, you know, things like a shared snowblower, a shared lawnmower, you know, shared rakes and shovels. I mean, you know, shovels and rakes are pretty hardy. You got to like run over it to have it break, you know?
Well, if you buy good quality ones.
Right.
We have had like stuff break. And some of the cheaper not forks, shovels.
Oh, yeah.
You can't replace the handle. You know, so but that's a different podcast.
Yeah, right.
To look for. So I'm pestering you to tell me more what could be a problem if you live in a small home.
I mean, you really have to be really conscious about how are you going to get your water? How are you going to get your electricity? So bathroom, of course, is always the big thing, right? Because right now you can live off grid, you can live on grid. We always tell people, build your tiny house with the capability of having a septic, like a camper would, where it's like, you know, it goes out a hose and into like a septic, but also make sure you get a composting toilet because as of now, most of us are just kind of like hiding out on properties or we go from RV park to RV park or you know, who knows, like, right. People are kind of everywhere right now. And if we didn't have our composting toilet, like we took our composting toilet out of our tiny house and threw it in our camper. So we go to the bathroom in the living room. That's the only place that it fits.
So much privacy.
So that's been a really fun adventure. I know, right? I was like, tell my husband, like, go in the bedroom, like, leave me alone. So it's really entertaining, but it's like, you have to have the capabilities of being off grid until these communities get going. But you also, most cities are requiring you to tap into septic, understandably, right? Like I'm a huge component. I'm not afraid of manure. Like I totally love the humanure movement, but I also am like, well, we also don't want plagues starting. So you have to be smart about it and you have to have educated people doing it. So you can't really have an entire tiny house community with composting toilets. And it's not really the best to throw it in the trash either. We do because that's the only option right now. We have compostable garbage bags and we throw it in the trash. And you're not, apparently, I'm so oblivious. I didn't even know you're not, we did cloth diapers, but at night we'd have to do regular green as you can get regular diaper because our son would wake up every 5 minutes. So we had to do regular diapers at night. And I didn't know that you were not supposed to like throw the solids in the trash. You're supposed to flush them. And I was like totally clueless. So we should do a podcast on that sometime and find somebody who knows about this, because I totally did not know that it was like really bad for it to be in the landfill. I'm like totally oblivious. But it's like, where does it go after you flush it? I mean, it's got to go somewhere. So
yeah, it goes in the sewer system, which if you have a functioning one, that's fine. But that's a whole other podcast, about options there are. And it's one of the pet peeves of my husband's that we live in San Diego, which is a city with tourists coming for the beaches, and we have so many sewer spills into the ocean.
Ugh.
And then we have a little city which is basically, here also cities are grown into one big city. So it's a city of its own, but it's in San Diego County. And you drive along a street and one house is in San Diego and the next house is in Santee, this other city. And they have a way where they have also lakes, which are treating the sewage. And I forgot the word for it now, but it's like a very natural system where plants and microbes and everything takes care of the sewage. And people come from all over the world to look at it and to implement it in their own countries and their own places. But right next door, San Diego can't do it. We have it's so political and so crazy. But yeah,
I actually watched the documentary on that, and I was like, why are we not all doing this?
It makes no sense. But there are so many things which make no sense. So
right, because it costs money to make the infrastructure, so they don't want to spend the money.
It does. It's sad, and it's also, if there's a will, if more and more people know about it and say, hey, we want this, then it can happen. But a lot of the infrastructure projects are put in front of voters, and if voters are asked, are you willing to spend, $3 more every month on your bill so we can do that, and people don't know why that would be a good idea, they're going to say no.
Yeah, because it comes down to education. Yeah.
You can educate. We are assuming if we educate somebody that it actually comes across as, oh, this makes sense, but not everybody feels that way. So.
Oh yeah, they almost have to like watch the solids go into the ocean and then be like, look, you're swimming in this. Like,
I know.
They have to see it happen.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, that's for sure. Yeah, so getting your water, how are you getting water? In your home, you have a ways that you could be hooked up to the regular supply.
Yeah, so in our particular tiny house, we have the regular. So it's that's a beauty of tiny houses, is they're kind of a hybrid. So they're kind of a camper and they're a house, but you still set them up like a camper because of the parking situation. So we can like actually screw the hose in to just keep it there all the time. We don't do that mainly because like ours is actually leaking. We can't find the leak, and we found out if we kind of, and you've always got that water pressure on it. It's like leaking, and we couldn't, but we have 105 gallons in our tiny house. Most tiny houses don't have big water tanks like we do. We like our showers hot. So we want the water to be room temperature and then it sits there and then we get to warm it up. So especially in Minnesota, that was a huge thing because it doesn't warm up in negative 25 degrees, no matter how high you have your propane heater. So yeah, we just fill it up with a hose. We have 200 feet of heated hoses. And we just, wherever we've parked, we just use their outdoor spigot, fill it up, and wind the hose back up and put it under the tiny house or the camper. And then electric, we've made some mistakes. We've used the wrong ampage. So you just have to be really careful, talk to your builder, or same with your camper. You just have to read the instructions about what, 30 amp, 50 amp. So we do have to get a little careful about that. We've tripped some circuits.
Well, I do said still, we're in an old house, so that can still happen. Now, I'm really surprised that you didn't get it done quite right, because you were even on the TV show and you had professionals working. So it's still a good idea to know exactly what needs to be done, which is true for construction in your house too. You always kind of need to double check everything.
It didn't cause a problem at first, but since we've moved it 4 times, see, that's the thing about tiny houses. Another interesting challenge is because you are moving it and it's extremely bumpy, and it's like your house going through a hurricane and earthquake at the same time. I think it just jostled loose but we don't know how to access it without like opening up the walls. So we're like, oh, we just don't need to use it, whatever. But it was really funny because the third time we moved our tiny house, we're like doing dishes and I'm like hearing water dripping. And I was like, what? It was like right after we moved. And I look under the sink and I'm so bad with, I don't know anything about building, but it's called like a catch something.
Oh,
It's
it's
like the
a
loop
U-shaped
under.
thing underneath. Oh, look,
Yeah,
I'm really
whatever
good.
it's
It's a
called.
U-shaped thing underneath. That one, people. Just look.
Yep. That had totally dropped down.
Oh, wow.
Like the pipe, and we're just like water's everywhere. So we just had to screw it back on. It was a super easy fix, but we were sort of laughing. Like now we know the next time, now when our tiny house gets out here, we are going to make sure everything's tight and then tighten up and actually search the house and be like, okay, is everything where it's supposed to be before we turn this water on? And we're going to, we won't fill the tanks up all the way. We'll just barely fill them. And that brings up another good point. Campers and tiny houses, you have to clean your water tanks. People get mold and it gets really dirty and people don't think about it. Our really small 1980s camper we started off with, while we actually owned our tiny house, the water tank was like black. It was disgusting. They had like never cleaned it. Our tiny house builder actually made it so we can access it. But it's my arm's too like small, so I like have to get like a wooden spoon and a towel and like get my arm in there and scrub. And you'd be amazed, like I didn't even know like grass gets in there. I'm like, how is there grass? Because it's usually well water that we're using, and so like half the tank would be full of grass, and then that's like fermenting. And obviously we don't drink it, but even so, we shouldn't be like showering. And so that's another thing is to think about is you got to wash out your tanks every once in a while. So when we get it back, we're going to have to do, like vinegar and hydrogen peroxide and baking soda and just kind of like let it sit and just sort of like scrub it and then have it go through a few cycles, which is wasteful for water, but it's better than dying of mold. So
yeah, for sure. And that's actually a really good point. That's something to know before you design your house, because if it's designed that you could just open that space somehow and easily access your tank, that would be so much better, right?
Yeah, because our RV tank we can't access, so I just have to hope and pray. See, most people use really toxic stuff, right? So they use toxic stuff to clean it out, and yeah, it does the job, but then you're drinking the chemical. So I'm like, I'm just gonna take the risk with like hydrogen peroxide and baking soda and vinegar and maybe some like lemon essential oil or tea tree oil or something, and just let it sort of sit. But yeah, our camper we can't access. So I'm like, well, I hope it's clean. I have no idea. I can't see it. I mean, I think we can access it as far as like look at it, but I mean, we can't like actually see through it or anything. So yeah, interesting adventure, but I'm so thankful. I'm thankful we can access our water tanks. But then the other tricky part is sometimes we forget we're filling our tanks up because they're so big. It can take up to 20 minutes. I have flooded the house 3 times. And then we're dealing with mold. So now when we get our tiny house back, we only are dealing with mold in the actual containers. We forgot to paint the inside of where our water under our bench. We forgot to paint. Everywhere else is totally fine. It just, we just wipe it up. We have cork flooring, so it doesn't mold. But we forgot to paint inside the water where the water tanks are. And we used all like natural, like organic paint and stains. So it's like barely stained anyway. But yeah, so I have to get in there and like scrub. There's a little bit of mold on the wood where the water tanks are because I've totally flooded our house. It was awful.
Yeah, so now it sets a timer.
Right?
Sets a timer. Yeah.
Oh, we just like watch it. I'm like, I don't even do it by myself anymore. I just have to watch it because I forget.
It's so easy. I turn on water all the time in the garden, and then
Right?
if I don't set the timer, I get involved in something else, and then I feel awful because water is so precious here.
Right.
Yeah, our brain can only hold that much. We're doing too much, that's for sure. Anything else coming to mind, or are we good?
Yeah, the last thing I can think of is just really air quality. Like I wish we would have put in a nicer air filter. The benefit is that we moved to Colorado, so windows are open a lot. So I'm not as concerned, but if you're in like a cold climate where you've got to have the windows closed for like months on end, make sure you get a super, super good air quality, because tiny homes are so efficient and so airtight, which is a good thing as far as efficiency. But as far as air quality, it can get a little dangerous. So we're blessed that we moved because we can just crack windows. But yeah, get a good air
So
filter.
I think it's so funny because when you say Colorado, I'm like, yeah, that's a really cold climate. And you're like, oh, it's so
It's so
warm here.
warm.
That's so funny. But yeah, air quality is huge. Well, thank you, Emily. That was fun.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate what a great idea to be realistic, and it is still totally worth it, but you want to be
For
prepared.
sure. And I think so much, I find it with a lot of permaculture podcast I'm listening to, and I have listened to a lot of them. A lot of times you just hear about the wonderful results and you don't hear about the mistakes, the failures, or whatever. So then when you go and try to do it, you're not as prepared. If you like, now, for example, somebody who listens to this, they're going to paint underneath the water tank, right? And they
Yes.
might have a design
Yes.
where the tank is easy to remove and clean. Yeah, better air filter, like also things you don't know unless you have lived it for a while. If nobody talks about it, how do you know? So yeah.
Right. So thank you. This is so fun.
And you're so enthusiastic about living in a tiny house, so it's obviously the good outweighs the bad, but there's definitely challenges to everything we do in
Oh,
life.
yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, be prepared and educate yourself. Sleep in one a couple nights, and yeah, you might fall in love with it. You might not.
Well, I'm sure for some people it would be
Yeah.
claustrophobic, that they need like big spaces, and some people need a lot more personal space, and then it would be a bad idea to move in with three other people in a very small space.
Yep.
Just for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, which I'm mostly not in the picture, I just noticed. I have my microphone off to the side. But anyways, Emily is not in her camper right now or in her tiny house. She's at her friend's house. So
Well, the next podcast we will do in my tiny house, and I'll give a tour, and we can have so much fun. And I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Very cool. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.